Hello and welcome to the WNBA Live Before Lock show, or if you want to call it the WNBA Super Show, it does fall under the umbrella of the Super Show. I'm your host, Walt Waddell, aka WDeuce85 on all social media. Flying solo today, 4-game slate. I gave an article out on FTN there. Just want to give my initial or additional, I should say, thoughts on the slate for anybody who's interested in grinding the slate today. From a PrizePicks perspective, any bets that I might be looking at, and of course, the DFS slate on both FanDuel and DraftKings. If you're watching live, we appreciate it. Please slam that like button. Don't treat it nice. Rough it up. Be abusive to it. It's okay. It can handle it. Also, feel free to interact with me throughout the show. Lock is in 30 minutes, so we're going to be cutting it kind of close. I'm a very long-winded young man, as you guys know, so I'll try to go as fast as I can through these games. Obviously, we'll start with the first game that's close to lock. We can do what it does. We'll go game by game. If we run over lock, it's okay. We have those other, lock times that we can still make those if you need to do like a semi-dummy lineup while you listen to me talk, or you're already figured it out. You're just looking for some additional plays. We can get through this together. We can win lots of money. Really cool. The $1 20 entry max on DK is about to fill. They did make that 1,486 entrants. Pretty cool that they're doing some bigger contests right now. We should have some bigger contests for the next couple of slates. The WNBA All-Star break is coming up as well. Was it next Thursday, I believe? So that's coming up. That's great. That will coincide with the start of the Vegas Summer League. I know California Summer League is going on right now, and then Utah will be going on the 5th. So lots of NBA stuff is starting. Summer League DFS is going to be fun. There's always a big edge to be had there. I will be doing stuff with Zach and some others there. So, make sure that you guys are checking us out. Some free shows for sure. And then content in our Discord, and mainly the Summer League gig is you want to make sure that you're verifying starting lineups. Playing starters in Summer League is such an important aspect. Obviously, in every sport it is, but especially so in Summer League, because sometimes people who don't start, they get a random day off. They only play a few minutes. Your only guaranteed shot at minutes is via starter. So checking out the Discord is going to be your primary source of an edge, which leads me into saying you should consider signing up for FTN if you haven't already. Go to ftndaily.com/prices. If you use my code DUB, you do get 20% off whichever package you choose. Right now, that includes Diamond, which is everything on the site. There isn't a gold package right now, which is niche sports. I am hoping that we'll have something like that very soon as we head into college football. And you can always reach out to myself if you're interested in signing up and you want us to perhaps work with you a little bit. I'm open to that, and I can talk to the powers that be and get you aboard, because the Discord is a very valuable tool for our site. We have a ton of smart guys, much smarter guys than myself, who give projections, their thoughts via articles. We have all these proprietary tools, our own lineup projections, and it's just a really great thing to be a part of. So highly recommend that you get down with that. And of course, the niche sports is what I do. And you're going to be a top-tier player if you mess with us with the niche stuff. So Summer League abound. In the meantime, let's grind this WNBA. All-Star break's going to be fun for it. There'll hopefully be a contest for it. There was in the past. We'll just have to see. But you are here for the 4-game slate. So let's dive in and talk about that. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to go game by game, give a few thoughts of each, talk about who I like, as well as give you guys, some core plays for each site, PrizePicks options, and then, like I said, any bets that I might be looking at. So first game on the slate is going to be Connecticut. So used to saying it like that. Sun versus Washington Mystics. The Mystics will be without Elena Delle Donne. This is a normal rest day. They have certain days set out ahead of time where they just give her rest. Obviously, she's had the back injuries throughout the past couple seasons, and they want to make sure that she's good to go for the actual playoffs. So no Delle Donne. Connecticut is a minus 7.5 point favorite, which seems, even without EDD, that seems pretty high. I think that the Mystics are good enough with everybody else to cover there. So that is one bet that I'm certainly looking at. The total is on the lower end of 159. So expect a bit of a defensive battle here, which is pretty usual when Mystics and Connecticut play. On the Connecticut side, I always like Alyssa Thomas. She is, my favorite player in the league by far. I'm always hyping her up. MVP chatter. I was happy that she got into the WNBA All-Star game. She got drafted kind of late. Her and Emma Meesman, some big value there, but I think she's going to show out. But only 9.7K on DK compared to 11K plus for Jonquel Jones. That's been flip-flop for a lot of the season. Alyssa has taken a bit of a backseat lately. Jonquel's been killing it. Alyssa had a stretch of 4 or 5 games to end up June where she was scoring roughly 19 to 27 fantasy points. However, she did finish off with a strong game against Atlanta on the 26, 15 points, 11 rebounds on her way to 43. And then against a very tough Chicago team in which they lost the other day, she had 38 fantasy points, 23, 5, and 4. Alyssa is top 5 in multiple categories, including assists, including rebounds. And she's a very good shot blocker, and she gets quite a bit of steals. So she contributes in multiple categories. You see against Chicago, she took 15 shots. If she's going to be taking that kind of shot volume, she could definitely destroy this 9.7 price point. So Alyssa Thomas, definitely my most preferred Connecticut player. I do have some exposure to Jonquel. I'm doing the 20 max thing in the dollar. I'm putting some lineups in that bigger GPP, the 2K to first, I believe. So I'm kind of switching gears a bit and doing more of the MME thing for myself as opposed to just one lineup build because there's a lot of volatility in the WNBA. So that allows me to get some exposure to Jonquel when ordinarily if I was running one lineup, I probably would look elsewhere. Now, conventional wisdom will say that EDD is out. Who's going to rebound? Connecticut's front court is going to go, nuts. Well, the Mystics are pretty flush with talent, and they can handle benching or giving EDD a break once in a while. They have the rookie Shakira Austin, who's been really solid. Alicia Clark is playing really well. Tiana Hawkins is a good end-to-bench player that can, do some good things. Liz Willie is there. And then, of course, Maisha Hines-Allen, the enigma that is MHA. She is somebody who can legit put up 3 fantasy points or 40. And it's really going to just be based off of minutes here. So without Alina Della Donna, I'd expect MHA to somewhere, 20, 25 minutes. I'm good with her. 6'4" on DraftKings, probably my favorite Mystics play, and the front court. So that's where I'm going there. A little bit of to Hawkins, a little bit of Liz Willie, and then just, minimal exposure to Shakira Austin. I think the 6'8" price point is nice, but I feel like she's hit a bit of a rookie wall, which is to be expected. We're seeing it with Ryan Howard as well, although it's a little bit on a less noticeable scale because Ryan Howard's is, scoring 35 fantasy points a game. Now that she's hit this kind of pre-All-Star break lull for rookies, she's putting in more about 28 to 30. So you don't notice as much, whereas Shakira was putting up 25. Now she's doing 17 to 20. So keep that in mind. The ultimate favorite play from the Mystics today for me is Ariel Atkins. Only 8.1K. The stars and scrubs thing is in basketball, especially. That's just like the preferred play, the preferred build for most people that play. So you don't necessarily see a lot of these players like Atkins get into lineups or have that big of ownership. But there's 3 players today that are in that low 8K range. I'm gonna hit on all of 3 of them and make it obvious you know what I'm talking about. That fit into a very balanced, build that I think can do some serious damage. And Atkins at this 8.1 price point is a very solid choice at that. Now you might look at her log and think there's not a lot of excitement there. She's not hitting the ceiling as much, but she does have this floor of about 20, which is giving you that safety. I know 20 would be, less than ideal, but it's not a disaster. And more often than not, she's going to give you 30 plus fantasy points. So right now I have her projected for about 34, which at 8.1 is great. We know Della Don is out. I know they play different positions, but that usage, which is over 20% of EDD going into the community pot, it's going to be absorbed by Atkins. And we know that her shot rate is one of the highest on the team. She takes 15 plus shots. She takes 8 plus threes pretty much every single game. So that volume is going to be there. Where Atkins takes it to the next level is when she's involving others, getting her assist rate up. She's rebounding at a high level. She's pushed her rebounding, up to almost 4 a game. Her rebounding rate is actually one of the highest it's been in quite some time. And she has almost 1.5 steals per game. So when she's contributing in all these other ways, that's when she really becomes an elite play because no matter what, she's going to score her points. She's a lot like my guy. For those that followed me during college basketball season 2 years ago for LSU, Cam Thomas, he's going to score. He's going to get his points. Every once in a while, he's going to add those secondary peripheral stats. And when he does, that's when that ceiling just goes to a stratospheric level. So Ariel Atkins is a core play for me. if you're running just one lineup, I definitely like her. I think she can do some damage against a tough Sun defense. There's no way around it. I think a lot of the defensive pressure will be looking to stop Natasha Cloud, who's 800 more, or trying to figure out how to contain this, MHA or stymieing this front court, which is going to leave Atkins in this unique position where the defense is somehow going to forget about her, and she's going to have the green light to chuck all game long. All right, rounding out the Connecticut side, Bonner at 8-2 is a pretty decent price for her. She just hasn't. I'm old too. I'm in my mid 30s. That's for an athlete. Not saying I'm an athlete or anything, but it's older. We know Bonner's up there around the same age as me. And we're starting to see this level of production that we're accustomed to from her drop off steep. And Connecticut has quite a bit of mouths to feed. Even with Jasmine Thomas out for the year with an injury, there's still a ton of people that have to get their stats. And that's really affected Bonner. And her rebounding is down. Her assist rate is down. Her steal rate is still pretty healthy. But fantasy point scoring wise, she's just not hitting the mark as much. She did put up a near 50 against my Seattle Storm in an impressive game in which she had 20, 10, and 4. But you're seeing a lot of 8-5, 12-3, 8-2, 12-4. Like, these stat lines just aren't cutting it. But this 8.2 price point is worth a shot because we know that her upside can go ballistic at any time. She did have 14 and 7 against the Mystics back in May for 30 fantasy points. If she gets 30 at 8.2, you're feeling pretty damn ecstatic about it. And we know she's going to play 30 plus minutes in a game that we suspect is going to be competitive. Like I said, I think that 7.5 that Connecticut's laying is a little on the high side. I just don't see them blowing the Mystics out here, even without Della Dom. Saying that, I'm sure that it's going to be a 20-point blowout, but on paper, it looks like it should be closer, even without EDD. I think people are overreacting to that news a little bit too much. So Bonner at 8-2 is kind of that sneak play where I think people will gravitate towards Thomas and even Jonk Jones, who's pretty expensive. And then, as far as Brianna Jones goes, Courtney Williams, Natasha Hiedemann, and Dejanay Currington, those are all your secondary Sun players, mostly GPP options, depending on how big you want to make your player pool. My player pool today is roughly about 41 players, a little on the higher side, but it is a 4-gamer, and a lot of those are just like 1 to 2 sprinkle lineups to get exposure. As far as Connecticut players go with my exposures, I have roughly 20 to 25% of Alyssa Thomas, which is the high watermark for me. And then I have a bunch of like 5 to 10% of Jonk Jones, Duana Bonner, players like that. All right. Let's move on. Seth Hader. I love the name for Seth Hader there. The Lexi Hole president of her fan club says Thomas isn't even the MVP of her own team. I agree. Jasmine Thomas, as good as Jasmine Thomas is, she's not the MVP of her team. Definitely. That mark goes to Alyssa Thomas. So I agree with you, Seth Hader. I agree with you. I'll talk about PrizePicks at the end. I know that when I'm on with Zach, he likes to do it game by game. I just like to do it all at the end. So I will hop, skip, and a jump over here to the next game. I'm excited that Seth's here. I'm going to have to do a show with Seth. Get him on camera. I think he might be camera shy, but we'll see. All right, so moving on to the next game here. My Seattle Storm versus Atlanta. 158 total. A little on the low side for that one. Whereas the Connecticut Mystics game, 159, I'm pretty okay with that. Like, I'm not going to touch it. I am thinking the over is in play here for the Storm. Did luckily get like a half a point over on the last Storm game. It didn't pan out the way I thought, but I still cashed it, thankfully. I think we're looking at like a 165 for these two teams. Atlanta's defense is obviously well improved. They went from the bottom rung last year to, top 3 defensive, especially on the perimeter. Team in the WNBA. Storm are favored by 5.5. I like the Dream plus 5.5 if you're looking there, if you're not comfortable with the total. Atlanta does have Tiffany Hayes back, another kind of enigmatic type of player where half the industry just despises her and the other half, like myself, really likes her. I think she's a really good player. Does she have attitude issues? Did she not mesh well with Courtney Williams and that disastrous team last year? Sure. Yes, and yes. But we only care about one thing, and that's putting statistics on the board, right? So if Hayes has an attitude, that doesn't matter to us one bit. She played 30 minutes in her season debut. I thought there might be some rust there. I actually didn't. I think that was the showdown slate. Yeah, I didn't even play that one. But 30 minutes, 8 for 15 from the field, 4 for 6 from downtown, 21 real points, 3 rebounds and assists and a steal. Had 4 fouls. That is something that Hayes does do. She reaches a lot. That's one of the things that's plagued her over the last couple of seasons. So you will see at times where she picks up 2 first quarter fouls and then you're missing some time. But only 7.5K here on DraftKings, roughly mid 6K, 6.6 on FanDuel. I think she's a fine play. Obviously, having her around drops Ari McDonald, which is sad for me. Her price is going to have to come down from that 7.3 before we really start considering her again. You see the last 2 games for Ari, her minutes are 19 and 16. Tiffany coming back for that 1 game dropped her to 16. That's very bad. And then even Asia Durr, who made us a bunch of money when she moved over from New York in this trade, and people just weren't rostering her for whatever reason. We were getting her at 4.7, 3.2 at 15% or less, which was nice. Now her minutes are starting to evaporate. You see she only played 16 to 17 minutes in that last game as well. And that's with Tiff Hayes and some foul trouble. So that's worrisome for me. 6-1, her price did drop, roughly $1,000 since the last classic slate she was on. Okay for a GPP shot if you want. But when it comes to the Seattle Storm, they are one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to giving up rebounding to their opponents. You wouldn't think so. Seattle Storm, they've got Brianna Stewart. They've got, Ezi Magbagor blocking shots, but they are really giving up for a Storm team a historic level of rebounds to their opponents. So a lot of people don't realize this, but it is a primary DVP spot to target. So front court players versus Seattle is really the sauce that you want to be looking at. Hayes has rebounding upside. She can rebound there. She plays a lot of wing at times. So that's why I'm looking at her and not so much players like Ryan Howard, who I think may have some difficulties today. Erica Wheeler, Asia Durr, like that guard rotation is starting to get really crowded. So instead, we're going to look at the forwards, and that starts for me with Cheyenne Pat Parker, and that's another of those I mentioned with Atkins, players on that low 8K side that fit into a nice balanced build. Only 8.1K. I think that's a pretty nice price. When she had eclipsed 9K, up into the mid 9Ks back in mid-June, it was really difficult for me. I kind of, doing my MME stuff, I would just click her out of the player pool because I'm not comfortable paying, 9.5 for her. As good as she's been, I much prefer this low 8K price point. And I think this is where we can kind of jump in and attack. And I don't think people are really going to be looking at her much today at all with the other forward options on the slate. I think we're going to see people pay up at forward, throw a value play in there and call it a day. So Cheyenne is going to be one of those players like Atkins that people just overlook. Looking at it, her game against Seattle when they played last on June 7th, she had 13 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, almost 30 fantasy points. Definitely solid. I like her for over 30 as well today. Foul trouble would be the only issue. Tina Charles is on the Storm now, but defensively, that's not going to do much to, improve the Storm's woes on the glass. She's not a Tina Charles hater. I'm going to sound like it, but she's really there to kind of pad her stats. Offensively, she's looking to score. She's not even going to be in the game for probably more than 20, 22 minutes. So I don't think her presence is going to affect that as much as people have been talking about. Yesterday, I was reading a Storm message board saying otherwise. So Parker's the play there. And then sprinkle in players like Kia Vaughn, who played 19 minutes last game, Naz Hillman, the rookie from Michigan, who I really like actually just as a player, not necessarily as a play today, but just her future with the team. And then Mo Billings. Mo Billings is good for these random, 30 fantasy point games at 2%. This would be the time for that to happen. In fact, last time against Seattle, in only 19 minutes, she had 11 and 9, 26.25 fantasy points. So these are some cheap prices on these dream forwards that people are just going to ignore. Kia Vaughn being that kind of value. Oh, she played 27 minutes. Sorry, not 19. Being that value, piece that you might want to look at. I don't necessarily think 27 is in the cards for her today, but Nia Coffey, I believe, is still doubtful, which would leave Vaughn with probably somewhere between 18 to 23 fantasy points. Not going to be much on the scoring side, but she could very easily put up, 8 to 12 rebounds and pay off that 3.6 price point. So if you don't want to go to Parker, I would probably look there. On the Seattle side, Ezi Magbagor has still been starting despite Tina Charles being in a Storm uniform the last 2 games. That's a good thing. I was worried that we might see the head coach there, do something disastrous and start benching Ezi. But the minutes are definitely taking a hit, right? Which is almost the same thing. Against Vegas, 25 minutes, and then against Indiana, 23. Although the Indiana game was an obvious blowout, so they didn't play her quite as much. but I still think it stands to reason that she's going to be losing 8 to 12 minutes every single game from Tina Charles, and then she'll take the rest from players like Lavender and, bench pieces like Talbot. Charles, 16 minutes against Vegas, 20 against Indiana. Only 2 games, but it's clearly going to probably get to the mid-20s to the point where it's just going to be a timeshare between Tina and Ezzy. We're going to need to see Ezzy's price drop. It's already starting to. She's been in that 9K range for quite a while. It's been hard to really use her besides, maybe a large field GPP build. Get her back down into that like 7-9, 8-1 range where she's going to be optimal again. So right now I'm just kind of taking a wait and see approach. As good as Atlanta's defense has been this year compared to last year, they still are giving up quite a bit down low. As far as rebounds, low post scoring, that's kind of their weakness. So Ezzy will do pretty decent in terms of scoring. I just don't know if she'll be on the floor enough to really pay off that 8-8 price. Tina Charles, they're trying to suckering us in, and I think off of name value alone, we'll see a little bit of elevated ownership on Tina, especially if people are just clicking through and looking at, game logs, and they're going to see 11K, 11.5, 10.6, like, whoa, what's this girl 8-1? What happened here? And they might not put 2 and 2 together. So minutes wise, she's not going to see that 36 like she's been seeing on the Mercury. She's going to see 20 to 22. But 8-1 on Tina Charles, large field GPP. I'd like to throw a lineup or 2 out there, but like I said, I am a bit worried that she's going to end up being kind of a little bit higher owned. We have 10 minutes. So I'm going to speed through these next 2 games here, and then we'll circle back around and interact. And like I said, if we go over lock, it's okay, because at this point we know what the first game lock is and we know what we are going to run. And while I have a second to remember, we'll pull up starters. All right, so for the Mystics, they're rolling Cloud, Adkins, Clark, Hines, Allen, and Austin. Really no surprise. That's typical starting 5 that they like to run when EDD sits. So no surprises there. Just to recap, I'm pretty high on Ariel Atkins, MHA for some GPP stuff. For Connecticut, starting lineup, Courtney Williams, Natisha Heidemann, Jonquel Jones, Alyssa Thomas, the GOAT, and DeWanna Bonner. So nothing abnormal there. Pretty usual stuff that gets us through the initial lock. We will move on to the next game here. I don't know. I love Seth, man. That's my guy. You guys don't know Seth. I'm going to retweet something of his later so you guys can start following him, because he's a funny guy and he's anti-tout. So that's an extra plus for him. All right. Next game, we are moving on to New York versus LA. Sparks -4. I'm really uneasy about that. I was kind of hoping it would be like a pick 'em or, even New York favorite somehow, because I've been making a little money on Sparks, plus money lately when they're not favored, like last game. 162.5 over under. I'd probably take the New York +4. Some places had it +4.5. I think earlier this morning I saw it on Caesars at that. And New York's playing well. I hate to say it, and Seth's here. He's with me. We're both kind of I don't want to say anti-Ionescu, although he might openly say he is. I think she's a fine player, but I don't know. This for a while it was fade her against upper tier competition, jam her into your builds against lesser tier, and she's been playing really well now. She's kind of unlocked things. She's got a good group of talent around her, and we see 5 straight games, 6 straight games over 40 fantasy points. She has 3 of her last 5 over 47. She's a very strong player. She's putting up a lot of stats. She's typically going to be higher owned, though. And that's where I think if you're running that, large field GPP stuff, you can get away from her a little bit, especially, when she's super chalky, because more often than not, at least before this mid-June run that she's on, she would come in under, 35 fantasy points, but she'd be like 50% owned on a 3-game slate, and that gives you quite a bit of leverage. She's taking a huge number of shots. These rebounding numbers of her, I'm not sure how sustainable these are going to continue to be. 13, 9, 11, 8, 7, 13, 6, 8. I mean, these are huge rebounding numbers for her. I think Rebecca Allen was going to try. Last I saw, she was probable. I don't know what her status is going to end up being. But her playing obviously takes a little bit away from Sabrina, not enough to be scared. But this 11-3 price point, it's really quite terrifying for me. And I don't want to just fall in line and eat that chalk when there's a potential for bust there. Brittany Sykes is out for LA. That's their defensive stopper. That's the player that would have given Sabrina the hardest time. So without her, we're looking at, Lexi Brown, Jordan Canada, who are good players. But defensively, they kind of lack, that aggressiveness that Brittany Sykes has. So that would be my main concern. I don't think Christy Tolliver is going to have the explosiveness left at her age to really defend Sabrina. So it's a fade at your own risk play, but also it's a 4-game slate, and I'm not just trying to slam her into 40% of my builds at that price when I can spread out and try to match with other players. Natasha Howard also feels pretty high at 10-2. She's been playing quite well. 4 of her last 5 over 30 DK points. 2 of those against Atlanta, who I mentioned front court is pretty rough. Seattle, who doesn't stop anyone from rebounding. And then you see it like a game against Chicago. She really struggled. Minnesota, she was just okay. So the LA game, I don't think it's necessarily a tough matchup by any means, but, Liz Cambage, Nneka, Shania, Ogmubuke, they all rebounded at a high level. They're very aggressive down low. I could see Howard potentially getting into foul trouble. Rebecca Allen being back, again, takes shots away from everybody as a whole. And I just think these prices aren't that advantageous. Instead, I'm still probably looking at Maureen Johannes, and that's less about her being such a good value at 7-6 and more of me just being like a super fan of hers. And I'm going to have exposure. It's the type of player that those of that follow me for college basketball know I have a group of players that every slate I just have exposure to, and she's one of those players for me. Really exciting. She's playing 30 minutes. I think there's definitely still some upside at that 7-6 there, and the Sparks defense on the perimeter having, kind of some injury woes, and they're going to be less aggressive out there. I think she has an opportunity to, maybe rack up some good statistics for us, especially through assists, steals, and rebounds. On the LA side, we got to pat ourselves on the back a little bit. Liz Cambage last game. She was higher owned, though. I thought it was going to be a little bit of a sneakier play because she hadn't been playing that well. But that price point, I think, just stuck out like a sore thumb at 8-2. And she ended up being like 30% owned in the $1 and the 15, so I can't sit here and beat my chest too hard. But she did put up 46 fantasy points against Dallas. Back-to-back revenge games from her against her former teams. Now she goes back down against New York. 9-4, I'm probably backing off her significantly. She tends to rattle off a couple games where she's really high powered, and then you'll see her kind of disappear. She's always a foul risk. So I'll be interested to see who gets who in foul trouble between her and Natasha Howard. Instead, I'll just go the 400 more for Nneka, where I have that safety. I know she's going to play, 30, 35 minutes. I know she's going to be right around that 35 fantasy point mark at worst, with upside for more. This team offers you quite a bit of value to, if you want to stuff Asia Wilson, Breanna Stewart, somebody from Connecticut into your lineup, you have this value at your disposal, especially with Sykes out. I think it starts probably with Katie Lou Samuelson, who's 6'7". I'm not looking at Jordan Canada too much. I think she's going to take a little bit more time to kind of get back into the flow of things. I think she was playing a bit over her head. As a Seattle fan, I watched her for years. I think she's playing a bit too well for her own talent level earlier in the season, so I'm backing off a little bit. Lexi Brown at 5'9", I would expect to start in that spot for Sykes and play heavy minutes. You see against Dallas, she played 33 minutes, had 13, 3, and 2. In the first half, I believe she had most of those points, 10 of those 13. She was hitting her threes. She's going to be out there chucking 5 to 6 triples. At that 5'9" price point, you still have quite a bit of value upside at your disposal. Kennedy Carter, 4'4". This is one where if you're running multiple lineups, you just keep flicking her into 1 or 2. This is like with Julie Alleman, who I kept telling you guys, just waste a lineup on her. Eventually, she's going to get enough minutes or she's going to break out because this player's too good not to. And then Alleman finally did, 3-9. She got us, 19 fantasy points, which I know is not totally crazy, but at that price point, when 3x is kind of the norm on WNBA, that worked out quite well. Carter, we know, can pop off for 30-plus fantasy points pretty much at any time. The minutes have been sporadic. She did have 15 last game, and then you look back against Vegas, 2 or 3 weeks ago, she had 24. I think we could see her get closer to 20 here, especially if Canada is struggling or Tolliver. Tolliver's the real impediment that we need to get out of the way. We need Tolliver's minutes to go down or some foul trouble, something there for Kennedy to really step out. But at 4-4, I'm more than happy to waste a lineup or two for the shot at her to potentially go off. And then Shanae Ogwumike, she's at 5'6". She is a really high fantasy point per minute player, similar to Liz Cambage in that regard. Needs roughly 15 minutes to pay off her usual like 5K price. Now that she's 5'6", we're going to want to see that get a little closer to 18 to 19, but she's fully capable of doing so. You see against Washington in 15 minutes, she had 10 and 9. In only 6 minutes against Seattle, she had 2 and 6 on her way to 11. In 18 against Vegas, she had 9, 4, and 3. And then 12 against Dallas, she had 6, 4, 1, and a block. So, at 5'6", you're probably going to get that rough 3x that you're looking for in single entry and cash games with her normal minutes allotment. But there's a chance for more, especially if Liz Cambage wants to, implode and get into foul trouble and play only 17 minutes, which is a real possibility for Liz Cambage. All right, the slate is just about to lock. So that first game, hopefully you guys got that in there. Seth says DD Richards, sneaky. Definitely. She was somebody mentioned briefly in the Discord earlier last game before Atlanta, just to watch her minutes. And you'll see, 13, 15, 13, 14. It's kind of trending upwards there a bit. Hanju's minutes have gone down. Sammy Whitcomb kind of came out of nowhere last game, and that kind of hurt. But any of New York gets into foul trouble, which is a real possibility, or it's just ineffective as a whole, they don't have any issue rolling DD Richards upwards of 18 to 19 minutes. We've seen it before. DD is one of the most underrated defend. I'm glad you mentioned her, by the way. She's one of the most underrated defenders on the team. She can legit guard 1 through 4, and I bet if they had to throw her on the 5, she would cause problems. She's that good defensively. She should be playing more minutes. Only 3.2K. Definitely an interesting price. All right, and then wrapping it up with Vegas and Minnesota. This is a rerun of the game the other day. And I get asked all the time, Breanna Stewart or A'ja Wilson, whenever they're on the slate. Obviously, if you can fit them both together, that's usually the play we see people do. But for me, it's really just been A'ja Wilson. And the fact of the matter is that Seattle, they have probably equal mouths to feed in terms of their starting group, but Seattle will dip into their bench a little more. Vegas clearly has 1, maybe 2 players that they trust from the bench right now. A'ja Wilson's a high fantasy point per minute player, like Stewie is, but she's just got that lock on the alpha roll. There may be a game where Stewie was very selfless. I'll give it to her. Sorry, I got mad allergies. That's why I'm sniffing. She'll defer. Like if Gabby Williams having a good game, she'll defer to her. If Jewel Lloyd's going off, she'll defer. Like Stewie's still going to get hers, but she won't take over the alpha roll if somebody comes out super hot. As far as A'ja Wilson goes, like she's always going to get hers. And if Kelsey Plum's hot, Jackie Young, she is hot, by the way. Jackie Young's on fire. Asia's still going to get hers. And it only helps that they don't really use their bench at all. I mean, you're looking at, if you're just strictly going off the last couple of games of June for streaks or whatever, 40 plus fantasy points in 4 straight against a tough Washington team. Seattle, we know they can't rebound. LA, she put up 50. And then Minnesota, 40. And Minnesota played them tough. Obviously, Minnesota has some really good defenders there in Ariel Powers, Sylvia Fowles. They're a tough team. So I think that she's just that safer play for me. I think we're going to see less highs and lows like we do with Stewie. There's some fluctuations there. Some games she might have a 30. Some she might go for 60. Asia's just like 40, 40, 40, 40. Like we know what we're getting with her. And I don't know. I value safety. Me personally, the way I play, I like to backload my lineup. If I'm only running one, especially with 1 to 2 safe players, and she is my highest exposed player up the slate. So goes without saying. As far as the guards go, Kelsey Plum, absolutely. She's just, having a career year. Becky Hammond's system is fitting her so well. When you look at it, she has a career high in assist rate, career high in offensive rating. Her true shooting percentage is right on par with usual, but her usage rate is the highest it's been at 25.2%. Her previous high was 21.9, and she had a couple seasons in between there at 15 to 17%. So she's been totally unleashed on the rest of the league, and she's just playing at such a high level. Her 3-point percentage is 42.5%, which is astonishing. Her steal rate is the highest it's ever been. She's averaging 5.8 assists. Her previous high was 4. She's averaging a career high in rebounds. Like everything is clicking for Kelsey Plum, the future Seattle Storm. I mean, if we want to, be serious about this. So 10-5, you're going to have to pay for her. Would I rather pair her with Asia Wilson as opposed to pairing her with Breanna Stewart? And because I got that question too on our Discord, and I'd say yes. It's just because I think there's a lot of forwards on this particular slate, and this typically happens on most of the slates, that I feel more comfortable with. So I can take a little bit of a downgrade at forward and still feel okay with it. Whereas at guard, if I take that discount from Kelsey Plum, and I try to take maybe Courtney Williams, for example. Courtney Williams, she's very capable of giving us a 35, but she may disappear a game and give us 17. There's just so much more volatility on those lower end guards as opposed to the forwards where, Mezzy Magbagor, Dearica Hamby, Ariel Powers, and then up to Nneka, Alyssa Thomas, Asia Wilson, like they're all going to give us a pretty high median floor score. So I'm okay with pairing Vegas. I think, obviously the total in that one is the highest of the slate, 174.5 points. Vegas is -5. Their defense is lacking lately. That is another thing that we've noticed as well. The rest of the industry is starting to catch up, but Vegas on the glass, they're starting to give up a pretty high amount of rebounds to the point where they're in the bottom quarter of the league now on their opponents rebounding. And they're giving up a ton of points. They're playing so fast, the lack of bench. Like, this is something that we talked about last month, Zach and I. This lack of bench, they're going to end up getting tired. There's going to be injury flare-ups. There's going to be soreness. There's going to be fatigue. And that's starting to happen. As much as we love to see these from a fantasy standpoint, these girls play 35 to 38 minutes. Yeah, it's amazing, but they're going to start wearing down. And I know the argument's going to be, well, they play overseas in the offseason. They're not going to wear down. Well, they're playing it, every other day, every 2 days, whatever. And on their EuroLeague teams, they typically have subs and they're still getting days off. So that argument doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There is some help that came over in the form of Ileana Rupert, the French team kind of future superstar. I think her, Marine Johannes, and Gabby Williams making up that French team. There's a bright future. She's played 15, 13, 16, and 15 minutes in the 4 games played. Her fantasy point per minute number has been quite high to this point. Obviously against LA, she struggled a little bit, but her high water mark was there against Seattle when she knocked down 3 of 4 triples, showed her ability to step out on the perimeter and knock down those threes, but also, bang down low, had 5 rebounds. Last game against Minnesota, 4 rebounds. So she's 4K. Price isn't as great as it was when it was 3-2 min price, right? But I still like her as one of the primary values because I know that those minutes are locked in. Between her and Shanae, they're 2 players who can, on LA there, that can score at a high level without playing 30 minutes. And when I say high level, I don't mean they're going to put up 40s. I mean, at 4K, we're probably going to be able to get somewhere between 15 to 18 fantasy points from Rupert. And at that 4K price, we're going to take that all day long. Even if she gives us 12 to 13, we're still going to take it because Asia Wilson's giving us that 40. Kelsey Plum's giving us that 40. Like, that's the thing I want to bang into your guys' head, because I know a lot of times I'll get DMs, oh, Rupert's killing me. Is she really killing you? She's 3-8. She's got 8 at halftime. Like, she's not the reason why you're losing, my man. So I just want to make sure that everybody that clicks in their mind, because I know we're so used to, especially earlier this season, all these mispriced players were crushing 8x value. It's just not a realistic goal when you're building your lineups out. And then Chelsea Gray, 9-2. She had been the player. That was another one that had been sneaky for us for a few weeks, priced in that low 8K range, upper 7K range. No one ever uses her. She had an explosion game against Minnesota, and now she's 9-2. So my interest is waning for her. Still an okay play. And then Raquana Williams at 4-4. She's somebody I'm kind of keeping an eye on. Not really plugging her in every slate like I was with Julie Alderman, but I'm certainly keeping an eye on her at 4-4 because she's a former starter. She's a high volume shooter. She's kind of getting her game legs back under her and taking, 3 or 4 threes a game at 4-4. If she can hit 2 or 3 of those, grabbing a rebound or 2, she's pretty much going to be at value. So as far as GPPs go, I definitely think she's okay. And then on the Minnesota side, Nicolina Mielich is 3-6, re-signing with the team. Obviously, her minutes are way down from when Fowles was out, but she's another player that's kind of worth a speculative, GPP dart type of option. In 10 minutes, she could easily get 3x at this price point. And going up against the Vegas, she could end up with, 6 to 7 rebounds during that 10 minutes. That's a really very real possibility. So I don't want you to just, jump off and not think she's worth it. I hope people will chase this Rachel Banham game. We have been through this with her before, put up a very, paltry 34.25 fantasy points against the same Vegas team. She hit 6 triples on her way to almost, like I said, 35 fantasy points. But you look through games typical for her, she's playing 15 minutes. She's scoring 12 fantasy points. Like, it's just not happening on a regular basis for her. If she gets hot from 3, you'll see a game against the Fever earlier this season. She took 11 threes. There was a game against Atlanta. She took 5, hit 3 of them. Against Phoenix, she took 7, 8 against Dallas. Like, she's taking a high number of those, but if they're not falling, she's simply not going to make value. And 5-3, there's enough value below her and enough value slightly above her that I feel a little more confident in. If you're running those 20 plus lineups and you want to heat check her, fine. But I think in like main single entry cash, stuff like that, people are going to chase that. I'll gladly fade. Jessica Shepard, 7.5. That's an interesting GBP price for her. Her minutes have been down. That's as Natalie Unchanway has started to play better. Fowles is obviously back. Damiris Dantas cutting into that. So she's kind of a hot hand player. If she comes out, owning the glass, scoring points, then Coach Reeves is going to give her minutes. 7.5 is worth a look. I'm fading Kayla McBride. I've been fading her. She's just not producing. This is a revenge game for her. But she is my fade of the slate, which means I just guaranteed her a 40 fantasy point game. So rush to lock her in your lineup. She's just not playing as well. It's nuts because when she's in a tough Euro league, it's like she looks like MJ out there. She cannot be stopped. But then over here on the WNBA side, it's not quite the same. And I realize the talent level isn't as good, but that Euro league is a pretty high level league. And 7.9 is an appealing price for her, but I'm just not there with her just yet. If that starts slipping below 7.5, then it's going to be a different conversation. Instead, I'm looking more towards Sylvia Fowles, who price has dropped to 8.5, which is interesting. We know the minutes are pretty much capped at the mid 20s, but now we're talking about 8.5. We're not talking about 9.8. We're not talking about 11.3. We're talking about a price where she gives us 30, 35. We're feeling pretty good about it. And that can be done against a Vegas team, like I said, that's bleeding fantasy points to front court players right now, especially on the glass and especially on block shots with all the drives they have. And then Mariah Jefferson at 9K. I'm going to keep heat checking her. This is really speaks to, I'm going to go on a sidebar here, speaks to how bad Vicki Johnson of the Dallas Wings is, their head coach. Dallas Wings Twitter handle and their fans tried to check me the other night when I said they should play Tiara McCowan more than 15 minutes a night when she was going off, and I was told I didn't know what I was talking about. But then after the game, Izzy Harrison, who plays for Dallas, basically called their coach a clown like Skylar Dickens-Smith did the other day, and even Charlie Collier said something about Vicki Johnson. It got deleted before I could see it, but we're seeing players call their coaches out on Twitter, and I love that drama. But the Dallas Wings are coached by somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing. And I don't think anyone can truly dispute that outside of, diehard Dallas Wings fans. Mariah Jefferson was stuck on the Wings, started a few games, barely played any minutes. She goes to Minnesota and all of a sudden she's playing like a superstar. Very strange. We see it happen with with Dallas and Alicia Gray last year. She barely played at times, strangely enough. Now she's starting because Vicki Johnson simply can't bench her without looking like a total moron. And Alicia Gray's playing like an all-star. So I don't know. I just had to get that off my chest because the Dallas Wings Twitter thought they had me, but all right. So core plays, as far as we'll start with FanDuel, my 3-player/person core on FanDuel: Cheyenne Parker, Mariah Jefferson, Naz Hillman. I think all of those are affordable pieces on FanDuel. And then on DK, I'm starting with Asia Wilson. I'm plugging Tiffany Hayes in there. And then my kind of call, I guess, of the slate, or my shot, is Cheyenne Parker, that sneak play of the slate. If this was college basketball, it would be the Pasha Alexander play of the day. For those of you that play college basketball, you know what to do with that information. All right, PrizePicks. Alyssa Thomas over, I guess it doesn't matter. I will not talk about the first game because that's not going to help you at this point. Cheyenne Parker over 22.5 fantasy points. Tiffany Hayes over 20.5 fantasy points. Also Cheyenne Parker over 5.5 rebounds. I love Nneka Ogmuguke over 6.5 rebounds. I got her for 10, easy. Kelsey Plum over 32.5 fantasy points. And we're going to finish that up with Mariah Jefferson over 13.5 points. Yep, being a super fish, giving you all overs, but these numbers are all far too low not to attack. I feel pretty good about this slate. If you guys have any questions, you can definitely hit me at dubdeuce85 on Twitter. If you're in the Discord, get in there. That's where we post the starters, talk about any late scratches, tilt the slate, all of that good stuff. Before I head out, let's check in here and see. Mystics up 17-11. Maisha Hines-Allen filling up the score, filling up the stat line 4-2-1. My girl Ariel Atkins with 6 early points. Alyssa Thomas is struggling. Oh no. And Junk Jones with 3-2. So Connecticut off to a bad start. Hopefully you jumped on that Mystic set plus 7.5. Obviously it's early, but like I said, I don't see them covering that. Next week we'll have a plethora of coverage. There is going to be a show, I believe. Let's see here before I get out. See what the schedule says. I think Zach and I are doing Wednesday or Thursday, so be ready for that. Those are both back-to-back 3-game slates, and then we slide into the All-Star break, and then we'll shift gears a little bit to the Summer League, Vegas Summer League. Appreciate everybody who support the show. Again, at dubdeuce85 on all socials. Get over to ftndaily.com/pricing. Use code DUBDUB for 20% off. Best of luck today, and we got next.